Welcome back to Your 1230, the only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions in just 30 minutes. I'm your host, Mike Salitro, and today we are very excited to be joined by Craig Andrews. Craig is the principal ally and founder of marketing agency allies4me. Using a proven method that mimics the stages of courtship, allies4me helps companies find strangers and convert them into high-paying customers. A first-time offer is like a coffee date that accelerates high-ticket sales. Welcome, Craig. We are thrilled to be speaking with you.
Mike, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to the 1230 podcast. Love the concept. Love what you're doing.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I'll get into our first question right away here. I did ask you before we recorded because I wanted to make sure I knew what we were talking about. But what do you mean when you say coffee date and first time offer? How are those two things related?
Yeah, so we work exclusively in high ticket sales. And what I've seen and what I've tried and failed doing is, walking up to complete strangers saying, "Nice to meet you. Would you like to buy my high ticket program?" And we would liken that to kind of walking into a bar up to a complete stranger and saying, "Hey, you're kind of cute. Can I have your phone number?" So we think there should be a coffee date, which is sort of a super low ticket offer that, I mean, like stupidly cheap, below the level that anybody ever has to approve, below the level that anybody has to think about. And it's a way of just kind of getting to know each other to see if there's something bigger and better in the future.
So that makes a ton of sense. And using the bar and coffee analogies, you kind of set the stage for it. That might work every once in a while, but here's a proven framework that's going to work more of the times. Do you get any pushback from your clients saying, this is working for me. I'm okay with the 95 rejections to get the one okay, as opposed to using the first time offer to warm the relationship?
It's interesting. The only people that get on the phone with me that are people that have a revenue problem. And so usually at that point, they're fairly open to ideas. I work with a lot of people that don't necessarily love sales. They sell because they have to. And this is a process that's made for people who hate selling.
Right? Do you love selling?
I'm sorry?
Do you love to sell?
I do not. I suck at it. I'm absolutely horrible. And that's why I came up with this process. I was starving before coming up with it. I've, invest 15, 20, 30 hours into pursuing a prospect. And, had a hit rate of like 20% or something. It was horrible, and I couldn't do more. There just wasn't enough hours in the day.
So now I'm fascinated. So you yourself, well, much like me, don't love selling, but you help other people sell their stuff, especially high ticket stuff. So how did you stumble upon this framework that mimicking courtship, as you say? How did you figure out that, hey, this might work, or I need to try this because what I'm doing right now is not cutting it?
Well, fortunately, with this much history that we have behind us, everybody's tried something at least once. And years ago, there used to be Columbia House Records, where for one penny, you would get 13 albums. So if you're the type of person that wants to build a record collection, they'll get you 13 steps closer to your goal for one penny. So I put together an offer just like that, except not 13 albums for a penny, but something that I thought would work wonderfully, would bring in clients. They'd think I was a genius, and it completely failed. And my second first time offer failed. My third first time offer failed a little bit less. And what I learned over time, and it took about 18 months to sort of get something working, is if you're selling a complex service, which if you're doing high ticket, you're selling a complex service, you need a complex first time offer to match that. So 13 albums for a penny or whatever it is that matches your industry, that's not going to get you to the high ticket. You need something that's a little more sophisticated, a little more structured.
As much as you can share, what were those first couple of offers that failed? What did you build on to make the next one better? And ultimately, what worked?
Yeah. So my first offer had two problems. One, it was a simple offer. The other is it was speaking to a pain that nobody knew they had.
Mm.
And so what I was offering was I would do a eye tracking analysis of your homepage to let you know what was resonating with visitors, what was not resonating. And I would do that. I think I did it for like $7 or something like that. And absolutely nobody bought it, because they didn't understand it. If they got it, if they once they got the results, they didn't really know what to do with them. It was just such an incredible mismatch. And so over time, I started moving away from that and moving towards addressing their pains, having an offer. And we would say that a good first time offer has 4 or 5 deliverables, and multiple deliverables should solve a problem. So my first offer, the eye tracking, was just it was more of a diagnostic. So it was telling them what was wrong or what was not wrong. So the magic really comes when you come into somebody's life and solve a problem for them. And so over time, that became one of the essential ingredients.
So I took a bunch of notes there because a lot of things I want to follow up on, a lot of great stuff you said. First, the point absolutely nobody bought it because there's a problem, or it's a problem they didn't realize they had. And I think a lot of people who are trying to sell something for the first time or package something the first time, they have something that either they fall in love with or that they really like, or they have yet to test to see if there's a market. Will somebody pay for this? Will this ultimately help somebody or solve a problem? And sometimes the answer is no. And that's tough to get to a point. It's like, well, I put all this time in, I put all this in, this thing is great, but nobody wants it. So you tell that story, kind of think of it to make sure that there is a market and to test and to iterate all those things.
Well,
Um,
and kind of to tie on to that, it's a real problem they have. They just don't realize they have it. And that's really the key is I don't care how much, you can't convince them they have a pain that they're not feeling.
That's excellent add-on. Thank you for that. Now, the other thing I wrote down when mentioning high ticket, how do you define a high ticket offer, or what separates high ticket versus non?
High ticket's always from the perspective of whoever's writing the check. And, I have one person um, sells, has a service that he sells. It's $50 a month. And I was like, interesting. I said, where are you selling it? And he said, in South America, Central and South America. It's like, well, what's the average salary? He said, about $1,000 a month, $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Well, I, that's 5% of their monthly income. So that's high ticket for them, for that market. For the US, usually we're dealing with 10K and above. We've done everything from 10K up to 1.2 million.
Okay. So thank you for kind of establishing what that is. I mentioned up top the company name, allies4me. Where does that come from, and how did you decide ally was what you wanted to be for others in improving their sales journey?
Yeah, well, at the root of it, everybody needs an ally. None of us can go through life alone. And a little bit of my story. A couple of years ago, I was in the hospital in a coma, and they were telling my wife I was going to die. And my wife very much became my ally and helped do for me things that I could not do. And there were several moments that I'm 100% convinced if she wasn't there, I'd be dead now. And so it's really about being an ally in the lives of others to help them in areas that that's not their core expertise.
So I want to follow up there on the obviously the point of being in the hospital, having your wife be that ally for you. We'll hear sometimes from people who have the traumatic experience from the "I would not be here," but and they have a completely different or a changed outlook on life. How do you, looking back, how do you look at things differently, or how has that been kind of a fork in the road for you?
That's a common question I get. And I would say that, in a lot of ways, I had the right things in place. Um, you know, Probably the biggest wake up for me has been anybody that's been married. At some point, you get into fights, stupid fights, things that just don't matter. And when you almost lose everything, it's a lot easier to look at those and say, that's not worth fighting over. It's just not worth it. So that's been the biggest thing. And it was one of the benefits was, I was in a 6-week coma, and my wife came to me every day, and she had to fight the hospital to even come in there. They weren't letting family visit back then. And the things she was saying to me when I was in my coma made it into my consciousness. And when I woke up, my trust and affection for my wife was just like through the roof. Oddly enough, my trust in the doctors went in exactly the opposite direction. And it's pretty much what they were saying around me when they thought I couldn't hear.
So as much as you're comfortable talking about, as much as you recall, what when you look back at that time, what were the things that either come to mind now or that stuck out to you then that it's like this something is different. I hear voices or I have this experience, but it's not what I'm used to. Or, looking back, it's this is what this was like. And I can't describe it, but this is what I was like. This is what it was like for me during those 6 weeks.
Yeah, so I use the term dream, but that's only because I don't have a better word. They weren't really dreams. It was kind of a place halfway between consciousness and unconsciousness. As my dreams progressed, I knew that I was sick, and I knew that I had to convalesce and rehab. And so one dream in particular, I believed I was in a weird medical commune in West Virginia, in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And it was in an old Victorian house with lacy white curtains and yellow tinted lights. And they put a willow reed down my throat, and which was supposed to make me better, but it prevented me from talking, and it was really painful. And they manhandled me a lot there. So coincidentally, so here's an example of what that looks like in the real world. I know on that particular day that I had that dream, because I'm able to look at my wife's journal and look at what was happening. I was like, oh, I had PT that day. Somebody came into my room and they were working my legs to try to get blood flowing. And at the time I had a trach, which kept me from talking, and it was in my throat. It made me uncomfortable. So that's what I mean, where it was sort of, it came as a dream, but it was really a reflection of reality. And in that particular one, this is the other way I was able to figure out what day it was. My wife, I asked her, I said, what side of the bed did you visit me on? She said, always on the left. I said, what about this day, September 20th, 2021? What day, what side of the bed did you visit me on? She said, oh, that day I came in on your right. I said, yeah, because in my dreams, that's where you were.
Wow. So, I mean, as you talk about that, you can really value is not even the strong enough term, but understand how important a ardent ally is for someone who's it's a life or death situation. And as you say, that if she hadn't been there for you, hadn't fought to get into the room and to kind of be there by her side, who knows how that situation turns out. So it's fitting how it's tied into the to the company name here and how you kind of fill that role for others, and going back to the day to day. What what are some things that when clients work with you, they don't realize what an ally can do for them, or you open your eyes to, they open their, you help them open their eyes to, this is something that you're either not seeing because you're too much into your business or you don't have this experience yet. And here's what I can do for you as kind of being the person next to you or by your side.
Well, I think a lot of your audience is kind of early entrepreneurs jumping out and doing something. And most likely they've observed someone else doing that. And they think, okay, for me to be in this business, I need to do this. I need to behave this way. I need to perform this way. And one of the most rewarding things for me is when I'm working with somebody and I figure out that they're trying to be somebody that they're not. And I give them permission to be who they are. And I look at them and I say, look, there's other people that do that better. There's only one person that can be you, the absolute best, and that's you. And the thing is, don't worry about drawing clients that are attracted to that particular personality. Make clients fall in love with you. If you're pretending to be someone else and then they fall in love with someone else that's not you, well, eventually they're going to fall out of love with you when they find out that you're not who you presented yourself to be.
That's really fantastic advice because, as you referenced, it's a competition of one. There's no one can, otherwise they are just doing an impression of you. So being yourself and being the best version is kind of your differentiator or your competitive edge. And as you say, it's hard to fake it, because even if you do a good job, at some point that comes to an end and they realize this is not what I thought I was getting, or you're not what you had sold. So I think that's a really good illustration of what what that can do for people that you work with and people that have you by their side, to kind of help them see this is what you need to package and sell, because this is your one thing, or the one thing that someone can't take or from you, or that you can't duplicate.
Yeah.
Um, uh, most of the time, when kind of selling to others, the idea of people never want to be sold, but they like to buy things comes up. That it's if it's positioned in a way where it's, this is something that's useful to you, or as we talked about earlier, you have a pain, I can solve that pain, and here's how. So how do you, when acting like ourselves, acting naturally, how do you kind of change the tenor of that conversation, or put it in a way where it doesn't feel like I am giving something to you that you may not want, or I am presenting something to you that you're not interested in buying?
The when we're doing a sales call, it's a 1 hour call. The first 30 minutes is asking questions. And and that's the nature of your podcast. You come in, you ask 12 questions in 30 minutes. And I would imagine you unlock amazing things and you see smiles on your guest's face because they're talking about stuff that matters to them. And the where I would draw the difference is, if you've been to any type of sales training, the questions that they give you to ask are are largely manipulative. They're designed to kind of box somebody into a corner. And eventually the question is like, some version of, well, would you like to buy my program, or would you like to die a horrible, excruciating death? Those are your choices. You have no other choices than those two. Which one would you like?
When you put it that way.
Yeah. And but these questions are really focused on trying to understand people. Now, we do add something that we call priming questions. And one of the things that we talk about is, before somebody can buy from you, they have a broken belief system that's preventing them from buying from you. And you have to change that broken belief system. And some of that you can change during the sales conversation, some of it you can't. And that's the things you can't change during the sales conversation. We move into the first time offer, which is sort of like a mini project. And it's much easier to change those elements of the belief system there. But what priming questions do is, somebody comes in with some assumptions. And when you have some carefully constructed questions that are there with the purpose of illuminating and bringing truth to light, a lot of times the best priming questions are ones that, when you ask the question, one, it's a perfectly reasonable question for you to ask. You probably need that answer to be able to do what you're doing. The second is, you're pretty certain they won't know the answer when you ask them that. And the third is that they will immediately know that they should know the answer to that question, but don't. And so what that does is that starts priming the brain to say, you know what, here's an area I haven't really thought about. And if he's smart enough to ask me that question, he's probably smart enough to help me answer it.
That makes a ton of sense. And that's where this whole topic of kind of sales and sales methodology and language always kind of baffles me that everything you've talked about so far is pretty common sense, especially when you compare it to the real life. I've met someone and I would want to take this to the next thing. A warm introduction is 9.5 times out of 10 better than going up to somebody blind. Giving somebody, small incremental, showing that you care, asking the right questions, asking the right follow-ups. These are common sense things, but they don't happen all the time, and it can be difficult. So for someone who has kind of the epiphany that you had and said, I want to do it this way now. I want to change from would you want to buy this or would you want to buy this sales technique to I want to ask you questions that are thoughtful and might be helpful to you. What's the first step that they can take to kind of get on that right path?
Wow, that's a good question. Um, well, and it's a big step. I tell people their biggest barrier to selling is their insatiable desire to sell. And when you can shift out of that into a desire to serve, it becomes a lot easier. I mean, so for us, the answer is always, a first time offer. I tell my friends, I say, hey, I'm that annoying friend that comes up to you and says, hey, are you going to accept Jesus today? And are you going to build a first time offer? You know, one will save your soul, the other will save your business. And the I just think they're magical because they're incredibly powerful offers that when you present them in front of a qualified buyer, the only answer they're going to give is yes. And when they're designed right, we design what we call a scarecrow in there. The scarecrow is invisible to the ideal buyer, but the non-ideal buyer sees the scarecrow and it scares them away. And so they work as a filter. And so you don't have to sell. You just have to present with a heart of service. A lot of your qualification challenges go away when you have a properly designed offer because they attract your ideal clients and they repel your non-ideal clients. They get rid of tire kickers. They get rid of all sorts of problems I've faced over the years. So if I was talking to somebody who was just starting a business and had to sell, didn't like selling, I would say the first thing you need is a first time offer for your business.
So that's a good answer, and I have come myself 180 degrees on this. With the first time offer that I'm nervous to give anything away or discount anything or kind of show what I know because this is proprietary to me, and if I can't have a first time offer because that's part of my package, that's part of my program type, and I've come to see that could not be further from the truth. That especially, and I love the scarecrow kind of visual that it's in there to kind of ward off the wrong type of client. But if you have your first time offer, you just describe it, create it in a way that's a value. It's a sneak peek of what it's like, and it gives something that it resembles what the end product looks like. It really kind of checks all those boxes because it signals to your ideal client that here's something that's going to help you now. Here's something that is a preview of what can come. And by the way, if this works for you, it's only going to work at a greater level if we were to move forward. So rambling here, but how do you convince people that this first time offer or this discount or this perhaps very nominally costing thing is worth doing if it's going to be a glimpse into something that they uh, charge a lot of money for a high ticket offer and there's no guarantee this person's going to buy it down the line?
So how do I convince people to adopt one, or how do I convince people to buy my own first time offer?
Let's go with adopt one. That I don't want to
Okay.
give anything away or discount anything.
So, um, everybody gets on the phone with me has a revenue problem. And so if they have a revenue problem, usually at that point, they're pretty open to trying different things. And, and again, I work with a lot of people that just don't like sales. And this is a sales process for people that hate sales. So that resonates. I quit telling them, back to what we talked about earlier. You be you. Nobody can be you better than anyone else. And if you think that you have to be some slick salesperson just to be a successful business owner, that's wrong. Don't be that slick salesperson. Be the opposite of that. And people are pretty receptive to it. But kind of tying into that, one of the fears that people have, they say, I worry that will make me look low value or desperate. And if I offer something like this on the front end, they're going to expect everything to be cheaper. And when I first started hearing that, I was like, that's weird, because I've never had that issue. But I've learned the hard way. Listen to customers; they're seeing something that I'm not, and so I kind of slowed down. I looked at it. And I was like, why do I not have that problem and they do? And it came down to three things that keep me out of the hot water in terms of people looking at it as low value. One, what you're doing in your first time offer must be high value. And it has to be high value to them, not high value to me. It has to be high value to them. The second thing is you have to set expectations and price out where the offer should be, or what its real street value is. And then the third thing is you have to have a plausible reason for why you're doing a one-time discount. And we have, and we actually have two that we bundle together, and they're 100% true. It's not false scarcity. If you do false scarcity, shame on you. That's not honest. And if you're trying to build a long-term relationship with somebody, don't start by lying to them.
It's a terrible foundation. It goes back to that person you meet for coffee, that if you are land that second date on something that is not true, or that's a clear lie, at some point your house of cards is going to fall apart. So it's a good way to end there. Those 3 points are really good, that you kind of set the relationship off properly, and you kind of build from there, as opposed to any kind of bait and switch or any way of tricking someone to kind of work with you. I'm looking up. We somehow already on time. I could easily ask you questions all evening, but I will wrap up here. Where can our listeners find you, or if they want to connect, learn more, where can they do that?
Yeah, so they can come to our website. It's allies4me.com. That's spelled ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com. And I actually have a free gift for your audience. And that is two gifts, as a matter of fact. One is a guide to making first-time offers. The other is a course, a self-paced course that they can take. We give them 23 days access to the course. And the reason we do 23 days, we're not trying to be stingy. We understand human behavior, and we know if we give you a free course and you sign up for it, you will never take it. You'll do it next, you'll say, oh, I'll get to this next month. And a year from now, you wouldn't have gotten to it. You would have forgotten about it. It will not have changed your life. And so we found that if we put a little time limit on there, we see it in the analytics, people come in, they consume the content, and that is our goal. We want to see lives change. So 23 days access. The way they get that is they come to our website, allies4me.com/1230 for 1230.
We'll post that. Thank you so much for including that. And I love the 23 days. I think that's brilliant, because you're absolutely right that if it's something that's never going to expire, most people are never going to look at it. So the 23 days gives them that finish line. So, well, I have to. This is good stuff. I want to make sure that I consume it. I read it. I use it. I've got a timeline. So that's very, very smart. I love that. So wrapping up here, I did jump around quite a bit, but is there anything that I didn't ask you that I probably should have?
Well, obviously, I lived. You didn't ask why I was in the hospital. So I had the Delta variant of COVID.
Wow. Okay.
And when they put me on the ventilator, they told my wife I would die, because everybody else if you got Delta, you went on the ventilator, you died. And I was actually the first survivor who left that ICU alive.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, your appearance here does spoil the end to that story, but thank you for sharing how it started. So we are very happy that you are alive and able to speak with us this evening.
Most
Your
people are.
well, your story is a great one. Thank you for joining us, Craig, and I do look forward to doing this again.
All right, Mike, thanks for having me on the 1230 podcast. It's been fun.